how you do it. So this is an interesting topic for me. I work with organisations, have done now for 30 odd years, all over the world, and change is one of those things, isn't it? Change is often described as a real constant. Change is always happening. We never really get to a point where we go, that's it, we're done, we dust it. I've been involved in so many programs where the client has hired me to launch a change. We've made the big change. It's been all the shouting, screaming, and throwing toys out of the pram, and that was just the HR team. And then a year later, they've got back in contact to say, yeah, about that change, the one I've changed, the change that was going to fix everything. We need to do the change again. So, very quick live today. If you're watching this live, hello, welcome. Very happy to have you along with us. If you're watching a pre record, that's all good. So, there are certain mistakes that people keep making with change, and often leaders describe people as being resistant to change. Now, I'm not saying they're not, but often we kind of misread the circumstances and we don't really make it any easier for ourselves because we don't do things that when you talk about them like this, they're really obvious to do. So it's not that people resist change, that they resist confusion. They don't like a lack of voice. They don't like being told it's a discussion and it's a proposal when actually, no, it's a get used to it. This is what we're doing. And there's a phrase that I came across very recently, being informed is not the same as being involved. And when I first got involved in this particular space, I always found fascinating that people talk to me about cascades. So, what's a cascade? Well, senior team, the SLT, the ELT, however you like to term them, where you are, they come up with a new point, a new plan, a new way of doing things. And then they tell their team and they make some slides. There's always got to be slides involved. And then they cascade that down. So I remember going, oh, okay, a big organization, that could take some time. Oh, yes, they'd always say this. This is what the client would always say. And the point is, at each stage, what you're going to do is to get feedback on the announced change. And I would always ask the same question: what kind of feedback do you get? And the answer was always the same. Yeah, we don't really get a lot of feedback. People sit their arms folded, looking unhappy. What we want you to do, Graham, is to get people encouraged, switched on, and wanting this particular change. The problem is, often leaders think, if I've told you, you're on board with me. But all I've done is I've told you. And there's a simple, really obvious mistake when you say it out loud that nearly everybody makes when it comes to change. So I'm going to walk you through a bunch of these. There's only a 10-15 minute program today. And if you are watching live and you want to jump into the questions, the comments, I'll be delighted to try and fill those as well. But let's get into this. So the first thing is this, and I'm modeling a lot of these ideas on Kotter. If you've never come across Kotter's change strategy, then it's worth a look. But often change is launched without any real sense of why. So you'll hear this a lot of the time. Why now? This is change for change's sake. Now, the problem is there could be really important commercial reasons why the change has to be put in place. There could be something that is time critical or commercially critical, but often we don't share that with people because we think it's all a bit complicated. But if we don't tell them why we have to do this, if we don't explain this, staff will always ask us, well, why now? What problem are we fixing? What happens if we don't make this change? You'll always get, this is change for change's sake. You will always get some bright spark saying, oh, well, new boss in town, they've just taken over, they've got to make their mark. How many times have you heard a version of that phrasing? Hey, how many times have you said something like that? If we don't define the urgency, people will fill the gaps with fear, with rumours, and with worst case thinking. People will stand next to the water cooler or the coffee place or the smoking shed, wherever you go for the real news. Because you don't get the news from where you work with the officially sanctioned announcement, do you? With the slightly awkward picture of the boss on the front, or the slightly weird photos of the great things we've done for our community recently. That's not where you get your company news from. You appreciate hearing from your boss, from your supervisor, from your direct, like however you get your structure, right? You appreciate knowing, but the real information comes from the informal discussion. That's where you think you really are dialed in. And if people don't know our stage one, if they don't know why this is urgent, why now, they will make up their own ideas. Final thought on this one before I move on to the next one. If we say to people things like there's big changes coming down the line, watch this space, and you've seen that, you may have written it yourself, people are not excited. They're generally not excited because often, for many of us, change is something to fear, as was once stated in Wayne's World. What do we think about fear? When we think about change, we fear it. Terrible impression. But people worry. So if we don't tell them why this is happening, they will make up their own versions, and their own versions may be worse than what you were planning to do. Second stage, there has to be some trust. Now, you can't just say, trust me, I'm your boss. You know that. But we often assume that because we have hierarchical authority, because we are this person's next in line, that'll be okay. But it's not. Actually, what we need, Kotter talks about a guiding coalition. So I would always recommend, if you have to push a big change through your team, I would always recommend you've got to find ways to get multiple people at multiple levels, all with their version of this change. Now, it means it's not going to be the super clean model, and that's okay, because that's how people really communicate. Often there is a team who are driving a change, and it's secret. It's got an operation name, because that makes you feel important. I'm not being flippant, right? It's nice. It's nice to have a secret thing you're working on. But people work out their own versions of it. And then there's only the one version, the approved version. Actually, what we need is different levels of different people. So respected leaders, we need informal leaders. We need experienced staff. Some of the best advocates for the change that you need to do are not already people leaders. They're not automatically supervisors. If the person who runs a bit of space by the canteen is a natural people person and their job or their key role allies with the change you want to make, you should be getting them on board to help sell and propagate why we're doing this. If you don't engage these people early, then resistance does happen. It becomes organized and it becomes quiet, which isn't very good for you trying to get a thing going, is it? So those are two first stages. Let's keep this moving. So I'm just making some changes to my screen there. People love a vision statement. I appreciate when I explain this, by the way, I sound like I'm being flippant. I'm really genuinely not. I love a vision statement myself, but vision statements don't guide behavior. We do need a strategic vision. This is what Kotter would argue. So often leaders will share a slogan. I referred earlier on, you'll see this. You see it on LinkedIn, you see this on social media, you see this on workplaces, coming soon, big announcement. Watch this space. There's an overused phrase. Exciting things coming down the line. If this is on social media, somebody else will go, oh, I can't wait. But that's not how most of us see this change. What we see is something coming down the line and we're a little bit nervy. So we want to know what the changes in decisions and priorities and trade-offs. If the people who are pushing this can't explain the change in their own words, there's no shared direction. Let me ask you this about a change that you have either put through recently or you've seen put through. If you are relying on a PowerPoint deck, other slide decks are available. If you're relying on your marketing team to pull together the comms, if you're expecting your HR and L&OD professionals to do all of this for you, then you are not having a clear, genuine strategic vision. You've got empty phrases and slogans. And at the risk of going political, we can all think of political leaders in the last 3 years, that covers left and right of the House, who have just churned out the same old meaningless phrases. And I'm sure when they sat and planned it, they thought, this is good. This will get into the national consciousness. But it didn't. It's become a stick with which to beat them. And it's the same problem you will have. If people can't say, well, that's kind of the vision. What does that mean without putting a slide deck up? Well, it means in their own language. How do you explain this? This links very closely to point number 4. If you're just joining us, we are looking at how you can improve change, the quality of it, the direction of it, and the success or otherwise of it. So communication is often treated as broadcasting. Let me say that again. Communication is treated as broadcasting. So what we need to do is to get our volunteer army. We need to have our guiding coalition. We've spoken about them previously. This is Kotter's language. And we need a volunteer army. We need people, early adopters who go, this is great. I love this. What we tend to see at the moment in change in many organizations is the emails are sent out, the decks go out, the briefings go out. Do not announce this until. I get if there's a commercially sensitive reason why. Of course. We want it to be managed. Of course. But what we're not doing is understanding that we're not winning hearts and minds here. So you get your emails, your decks, and your briefings, they get sent out. But if anybody asks a question, and you will have seen this, they're often handled in a very defensive way. Occasionally they're shut down. I have spoken at, I don't know, hundreds of conferences over the years. And many times I've said to whoever the client is, and you'll understand, I often work with HR and L&OD people. I'm often working with the marketing team. I'm often working with the training team. And I will say, oh, this bit we're doing here, is it okay if I refer to, can I talk about this? There's sometimes a slightly awkward moment. They go, oh, you can't mention that. People are negative about it. And I always have to explain to them, look, we'll talk about or not talk about whatever you want. But just because you say we can't talk about it now doesn't mean it never gets talked about. In fact, that's a great way to ensure it's going to be discussed well away from anyone in charge. Again, you know this. Where do you get your news from? So we've got to understand that a volunteer army is going to start arguing and answering and engaging with people right across the organization at all levels. Buy-in will only happen when people can challenge you, when they can question you. Buy-in is only going to happen if I, in my team, my department, my office, my bit of the training floor, whatever, it will only happen if I can influence how it change and how it lands here. If there is one way, the only way, and that was designed by our on-high team that have launched this thing, it is a strategic, this is the plan. But that's not how people really do change. Think about this as a brief example. We're almost at the end of the year as I'm making this program live right now, okay? It's 3:30ish on the 31st of December 25. Many people will have some kind of plan for next year about cutting down on certain types of food, exercising more, getting up, swimming early, cutting back the booze, knocking the vaping or the smoking. Lots of people have those kind of goals. But the difference between people who have some success and people who don't is often those people who remove the friction. So the people who think, right, I ought to be running X amount, but actually the first thing I'm going to do tomorrow is just get up earlier, put my training shoes on, just going to go outside and see how that goes. It's often the people who can adapt the plan to suit themselves. And often what we expect people in our workplaces to do is take one and one only model and method for implementation and go, there it is, you all now do it. Let's keep going. We're on point 5 of 8 here, and then I'm going to sum this little program up. We've got to remove barriers. What does that mean? Well, if we have systems and workload and skill gaps and policies that are the same, and we expect people to navigate them, if we tell people to be agile, here's what will happen. If those barriers remain, people will drop the effort. So again, imagine that getting up early to go for a run around the block example I just gave you. If you have to get up early and freshly launder your clothing because that's what the rule said, and get your shoes out of the car, and then you have to go do something else, all of those are friction points. These are barriers to you doing your new plan, which is why People who often argue about a new change of behavior say remove the friction, have the running shoes by the side of the bed or at least by the front door, have your kit there ready to go with your water already set up and your pumped up tunes all set on your phone, however you're going to do this, right? It's the same at work. If we say to people, this is the new process, and they go, okay, fine, it's a new process, but I've still got to do this, this, and this. I'm still not being helped with my skill, my skill gaps. There's still these policies in the way. That's a massive barrier. And that is when effort drops and cynicism rises. Number 6, if you don't have early wins, you are struggling to take people with you. If in 25, 26, you're saying we're announcing a new program that we're going to kick off in Q1 of 26, and we should see some amazing results by 2030, that looks great on a spreadsheet. It's not how people work. The reason why, let's come back to that strategy, the reason why if you stop eating your favorite jelly, sugary sweets today, that you might feel good quite quickly is because that tiny little change you'll start to feed through in how you feel at night or just in terms of energy spikes and drops. It's much the same as changes at work. We need to give people quick wins. Without quick wins, right, it's really hard for them to stay maintained in what they're doing. So leaders will often talk about future benefits. What's staff experiencing? They're experiencing more work, more pressure, and no visible gain. So we need to give them early proof. Otherwise, people just disengage and wait for you to say, we tried it, it didn't work. If you've got a history of things you've tried to change in your workplace, in your team or department, where we tried it, it didn't work. Oh yeah, we tried that before, didn't work then, won't work now. It's because you're not giving people enough wins early on. Anybody who cuts a poor health habit out of their life will often tell you early on they felt a belt size drop, or they caught sight of themselves in the mirror and thought, oh, okay, that's better than I thought, or they ran a little bit further before collapsing in a state of exhaustion. My point being, people see improvement. If you don't see improvements in the changes at work, why will they stick with it? Number 7, people don't see that change takes time. So often we declare a finish too soon. So the initial activity slows up because it's dead in theory. Right, week 1 of your new health campaign, you'll go to the gym 5 times. Week 2, well, I did 5 times last week. I'll do 3 times this week. It's still 4 times a week. That's 8 times over 2 weeks. Week 3, I'll do 2 times because that's 10 times over. You get the point. It starts to slow. And most of us are the same. It's hard doing something different. It's difficult doing something different. So we see often old habits start to return. We see people start to creep back to what they're more comfortable with. And worse, leaders, you, if you're watching this, move on, but staff are still adjusting. So we need to stay with them. We need to keep helping them. Finally, number 8, we've got to anchor the change into our new culture. So remember, I've been referring to Kotter's 8 steps here. This is our final point. So leaders tend to say, this is how we do things now. This is the new thing. We're all sorted. But the incentives and the measures and the role modeling stay the same. So what are you going to do in that situation? Well, you're likely to revert back to what actually gets rewarded. If I can briefly go political for a moment, regardless of your view on politics, simply as a measure of human behavior. At the moment, we have a government which says its priority is growth. Whilst saying its priority is growth, it has increased taxes on both employers and employees. They wouldn't admit that, but that is how most people would see it. But it's increased both cost and administrative burden on employers. Meanwhile, it has added a 3.8% bonus to people on benefits. So if you work or employ others, it is harder and it costs more. If you don't work and you claim benefits, you get more money. So what we have done, what the government has done, I'm not going to speak on their behalf, what the government has done is to create a situation where it says we want this, but it incentivizes that. This is one of the most simple mistakes that organizations make. And so we've done this, we've made the change, we can now move on to our next thing. Meanwhile, you've got a much slower tail of people behind you adopting, part adopting, changing, altering, dropping out, and going back to the systems that worked for them up to that point. Always remember, when you first start to talk about change to your team, the first thing they are thinking about is not, does this work for the team? Is this great? Is this amazing? The first thing they think about is, how will this affect me? It's not because they're bad people, it's because they're normal humans. And that's how we all process. What's this going to do for me? All right, listen, folks, it's been lovely having you here on this live today. People don't hate change. They hate being excluded from the decision and the process and then making it happen. They hate not understanding it or why it's happening. And they also really struggle with carrying the consequences that they had no, no input to. So they've got the consequences of decisions that they had no part in shaping. So that has been today's live here on YouTube, TikTok, and Facebook. So I'm branching out to 3 different channels here. So lovely having you here on the program. Please do check me out and check out Blue Beetle. If you have questions, comments, observations, then get in touch.